They said that stretch of land was cursed. The wind didn't whistle there. It moaned. Even the coyotes kept their distance, as if they knew that the earth itself remembered what it had swallowed. Calder Boone didn't believe in curses. But he believed in silence, and that land was full of it. He'd been riding west for 3 days, following no road, no map, and no promise. Just the sun and a shadow that followed him like guilt. His horse was tired, its ribs showing through the hide. His coat was the color of the dust he rode through. And the only thing that still looked alive beside him was the dog. A big, scarred shepherd with one ear missing and eyes that reflected more than the man ever said aloud. The dog's name was Ash, because everything they left behind turned to it. The sky that morning was white and endless, a hard kind of white that burned the eyes and made the world feel hollow. Calder rode slow, hat pulled low, a cigarette dying between his lips. His boots were cracked, his saddle worn. He hadn't spoken in 2 days. Didn't need to. The dog knew every thought before it came. Some said Ash had saved his life once, dragged him out of a battlefield when men were dying like cattle. Calder never told the story himself. Because when you've been saved by something that can't speak, you start to wonder if you were meant to live at all. By noon, the heat began to shimmer across the plain like ghosts dancing. The horse stumbled, thirsty. Calder climbed down, gave it what was left of the canteen, then turned his eyes to the horizon. Nothing but rock, dust, and God's silence. Then the dog froze, ears up. Nose twitching. A low growl broke from its chest. Not fear, not anger. Something older. Something that sounded like recognition. Calder narrowed his eyes. "What is it, boy?" Ash barked once, then twice, then took off running, straight across the desert. Calder swore under his breath and followed, boots crunching on dry ground, heart pounding faster than it had in years. The sun hit his back like fire, and every step raised a small storm behind him. The dog led him down a slope, an old washout where the sand had piled up from flash floods long gone. And there, half hidden in the dust and dry brush, lay something that didn't belong to the desert. A shape. Still. Small enough to be mistaken for death. Calder stopped breathing for a moment, then moved closer. It was a woman. Her hair, long, tangled, once golden, was matted with sand and blood. Her dress was torn to ribbons, faded blue now turned to brown by dirt and sun. One arm was stretched out, fingers curled around nothing, as if reaching for something that had been taken from her. Ash circled her, whining. That broken, desperate sound dogs make when they recognize something their hearts can't understand. Calder knelt. He didn't touch her at first, just watched. The desert was cruel. It often left behind shapes that looked like people but weren't, bones that pretended to be hope. But then she moved, barely, a tremor in the chest, a breath so fragile it might have been imagined. Calder reached for her wrist, feeling the ghost of a pulse. And when he brushed the hair from her face, the world simply stopped. It wasn't possible. But it was her, Eleanor, the woman he'd once promised to marry, under the cracked bell tower of Lost Chapel, the same woman they told him had burned to death in her family's homestead when the Union troops passed through. He'd buried her in his mind. He'd grieved her under the same stars that now burned above this wasteland. He'd carried her ghost in his chest for 7 years, and now she lay before him, breathing. Calder's hands trembled. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and gunpowder, a scent he always noticed before something bad happened. He tried to speak, but no words came. His throat felt made of dust. Ash pressed close, licking the woman's hand, whining louder, tail low. He looked from her to Calder, as if asking what to do, as if the animal understood that this moment was something the living weren't supposed to see. Calder lifted her gently, brushing more sand from her face. Her lips were cracked, her skin burned by the sun. He saw the faint outline of a locket against her neck, tarnished but still there. He opened it. Inside was a piece of paper, folded small, stained with sweat and tears. He unfolded it slowly, afraid of what the world might become once he read it. It was his own handwriting. "If I don't come back by the first frost, marry no one. I'll find you. I swear it." "See," he closed it. The wind howled through the canyon like a church organ gone mad. And Calder Boone understood that some promises don't die when you break them. They wait for you in the dirt. He carried her back to his horse, every step heavy as sin. Ash followed, silent now, as if even he knew the desert had changed shape. When Calder looked to the west, the horizon had gone red. Not the color of sunset, but the color of warning. He laid her across the saddle, covered her with his coat, and spoke for the first time in days. "Easy now, Eleanor. We're going home." But home was a place that hadn't existed for years. The dog barked once, sharp and hollow, and the three of them, the man, the beast, and the dying bride, disappeared into the bleeding horizon, and somewhere behind them, the wind began to whisper again. Not a curse this time, a name. Night fell without ceremony. No stars, no moon, just a sky black as coal, pressing down like a coffin lid. Calder Boone made camp near a dead creek bed, a place where the wind hissed through the rocks like a warning he didn't care to hear. He laid the woman beside the fire, wrapped her in his own blanket, and kept his rifle close. The dog Ash sat a few feet away, always watching, always listening. She hadn't woken, but she breathed, and that was enough to ruin a man's peace. Calder poured a little water onto a rag, brushed the sand from her face, and tried not to look too long. Every time his eyes met hers, closed though they were, something deep in him twisted, half sorrow, half disbelief. He'd seen her coffin. He'd carried the wood. He'd thrown the dirt. So who was this woman with Eleanor's face and Eleanor's heartbeat, lying in his firelight now, as if time had made a mistake? The flames cracked and spat, painting her skin gold, then red, then pale again. The desert night was cruel, colder than truth, hungrier than death. Calder fed the fire and muttered to himself, the way men do when they've been alone too long. "You weren't meant to come back," he said softly. Ash lifted his head, ears twitching, as if he agreed. For hours, Calder sat there, staring into the flames. His mind wandered to Lost Chapel, the ghost town where he'd been born and damned. He remembered the church bell rusting on the ground, the way Eleanor used to laugh when the wind made it ring. He remembered her hair catching firelight, and how he swore, with hands trembling and heart full of dust, that he'd come back for her. He never did. War stole his youth, and silence stole everything else. Now she was here, dying in front of him, and for the first time in 7 years, Calder Boone didn't know which sin was worse, breaking a promise or keeping one. Sometime after midnight, the dog growled, low, deep, and certain. Calder froze. His hand slid to the rifle, finger near the trigger. The desert was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind had stopped moving. Then came the sound, faint footsteps in the dark, circling just beyond the reach of firelight. Coyotes, maybe. Or worse, men. He stood slowly, his shadow stretching long behind him. "Show yourself," he said to the dark. Nothing, only silence. Then, the woman stirred, her head turned, lips parting with a dry whisper. Calder knelt at once, rifle forgotten, eyes wide. "Eleanor?" Her voice came weak, cracked from thirst. But it was her voice. "Where are we?" "Safe," he lied. "For now." She looked at him for a long moment, eyes clouded, unfocused, and then tears welled up, cutting clean lines through the dirt on her cheeks. "Calder," she breathed. "You came." He wanted to tell her everything. How he'd never stopped dreaming of her. How he'd dug her grave himself. How he'd sworn never to forgive God or man for what they took. But the words jammed in his throat like bullets that wouldn't fire. Instead, he said the only thing that made sense. "I never stopped riding," she smiled faintly. And in that small, broken curve of her lips, the world felt alive again, if only for a heartbeat. Then she coughed. Blood. Calder grabbed the canteen, lifted her head gently, let a few drops touch her lips. She swallowed, gasped for air, then fell back into silence. Ash whined low beside them, tail brushing the dirt. He'd been staring past the firelight all this time, ears pinned back, body stiff. Calder followed his gaze, saw nothing, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't fade. When dawn came, the light hit her face and revealed what the night had hidden. Faint burns along her neck and shoulder. Scars too old to be fresh, too new to belong to a ghost. He traced them with his eyes, not daring to touch.
"What did they do to you?"
He whispered. No answer, only wind. But something inside him knew the truth didn't matter. Not yet. He had to keep her alive long enough to find out why the desert had given her back. Calder packed their things by noon. He lifted her onto the horse, slow and careful, her weight light as a shadow. Ash trotted ahead, leading the way as if he knew where to go, nose to the wind, tail low, every step cautious. They followed a dried riverbed for hours. The land was silent but not empty. The wind whispered names in the dust, names Calder hadn't spoken since the war. When the first gunshot came, it didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like memory. The bullet hit the dirt by his boot. Another followed, closer. Calder dove behind a boulder, dragging the woman down with him. She moaned softly, still half-conscious. Ash barked once, fierce and wild. The echoes bounced off the canyon walls, but Calder couldn't see who was firing. Then, through the dust, a voice, rough, cracked, full of old hate. "Didn't think you'd come back, Boone." The kind of voice that belonged to a man who'd buried too many friends and not enough enemies. Calder's hand tightened on the rifle. The fire in his chest, the one he'd thought died with Eleanor, came roaring back to life. He peeked over the rock, saw movement, 3 riders, shadows against the glare, each carrying more ghosts than bullets. Calder looked back at her, the woman who shouldn't have been alive. He whispered, "Hold on, Eleanor." "Looks like the past found us first," Ash growled low, teeth bared. The dog stood beside him, ready, loyal, unflinching. Together they waited for the riders to come. And as the wind rose, whispering through the canyons like a hymn for the damned, Calder Boone realized something cold and true. If the desert had brought Eleanor back, it might want something in return. The first bullet tore through the air and buried itself in stone. The second found Calder's hat, snapping it clean off his head. By the third, the dog was already moving, a blur of teeth and instinct. Calder Boone had lived through war. He'd seen men die for less than a word and live for reasons no one could name. But this was personal before the smoke even cleared. He rolled to his left, rifle steady, eyes cold as the steel he carried. The desert swallowed every sound except his heartbeat and the dry echo of hooves somewhere beyond the ridge. He'd counted 3 riders, 3 ghosts that still bled. When the dust parted, he saw them. The first man wore a Union duster, faded blue, with a scar that pulled his mouth sideways into a permanent sneer. The second was older, pale eyes, gray beard, and a calmness that only came from killing too long. The third was just a shadow, tall and lean, keeping back, rifle resting easy, patient as a vulture waiting for something to stop moving. Calder exhaled slow. He knew that scar. He knew that sneer. He knew that voice that had called his name out of the dark. Mason Briggs. He said it like a prayer that had turned to poison. The man smiled through the dust. "Well, look who still draws breath." Calder's finger twitched near the trigger. "You should have stayed buried with the rest of them." Briggs spat into the dirt. "We tried. You left us for dead in that burning town. Thought the fire took you, too." "Guess we both got cheated," Ash growled low, pacing at Calder's side. Behind him, Eleanor stirred, whispering words that didn't make sense, fragments of a memory or a dream too old to belong here. Calder risked one glance. Her lips were pale, eyes half open, confusion swimming in them. "Mason," she whispered. Calder froze. Briggs laughed. "Oh, she remembers. Don't she always?" The old one spoke now, his voice dry as bone. "You shouldn't have brought her back, Boone. Some things ain't meant to wake." That hit Calder harder than the bullets. He looked at them, really looked, and saw something he'd missed before. They weren't here to rob him. They weren't here to kill him for bounty. They were afraid. Briggs shifted in the saddle. "That woman. She died in that fire, Boone. We saw her burn. She screamed for you till her voice broke." He leaned forward, eyes wide, voice trembling. "You hear me? We buried her ourselves. So what the hell is she doing breathing now?" Calder said nothing. He didn't have words for this kind of madness. He just raised the rifle and aimed between the man's eyes. "Let's find out," he said. The next few seconds belonged to the devil. The rifle cracked once. Briggs's horse reared, the man tumbling down with a scream that vanished into dust. The second man fired back, sparks flying off rock. Ash lunged forward, disappearing into the smoke, his growl cutting through the gunfire like thunder in bone. The air filled with sand, heat, and death. When it cleared, 2 men were on the ground, one moaning, one still. The third, the tall shadow, was gone. Calder reloaded slow, breathing hard. Ash limped back to him, blood on his fur but not his own. The dog's eyes burned with something human. Rage, loyalty, and warning all tangled into one. He walked to Briggs, who was clutching his stomach, coughing blood, face gray. Calder knelt beside him. "Talk." Briggs spat red. "She's not, or what you think." He coughed again, voice fading. "She died. Boone, we buried her. But someone, dug her back up." Calder's jaw tightened. "Who?" Briggs looked past him, toward the woman lying in the dust. "You think she came back for you? You think the dog found her? But you got it backward." He grinned through the pain. "She found him." The words didn't make sense, not yet. Calder's mind flashed with firelight, screams, and the church bell falling from the tower. Lost Chapel. The night everything burned, he stood slowly, stepped back, and aimed one last time. Briggs's laughter echoed through the canyon, wild and choking. "You'll see, Boone, when the sun dies. You'll see what you brought back." The shot silenced him. The desert fell still again, too still. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Calder turned toward Eleanor. She was sitting up now somehow, her face pale but her eyes awake and wrong. There was something in them he didn't remember. Something that wasn't hers. Calder. She said softly, voice trembling. "They said I died." He nodded once. "You did." She looked away, eyes wet, voice barely a whisper. "Then why can't I remember it?" Ash barked once, sharp, urgent. His hackles were up, eyes fixed on the ridge. Calder followed his gaze and saw movement again. The tall, lean rider, the one who hadn't fired. He was watching them from the edge of the sunlight, hat pulled low, rifle across his lap. And even from that distance, Calder felt something crawl up his spine, because that man wasn't just familiar. He was impossible. Calder whispered the name, voice breaking like old glass. Elias Boone. His brother, dead 10 years, burned in the same fire that took her. The rider tipped his hat once, slow, cold, like a man greeting a grave, and rode away into the heat shimmer. Calder didn't move. Didn't breathe. The dog whined, Eleanor wept softly, and the desert whispered its cruel refrain. Some ghosts come back walking, others come back waiting, and Calder Boone realized, too late, that he wasn't the only one the fire had spared. They rode in silence for half a day before Calder spoke. Even then, it wasn't to Eleanor. It was to the wind. 10 years dead, he muttered. And still casting a shadow. Ash trotted ahead, limping slightly but steady, eyes sharp as ever. The dog hadn't stopped looking over his shoulder since they'd left the canyon. He didn't trust the wind anymore. Neither did Calder. Behind him, Eleanor rode slumped in the saddle, head against his shoulder, her breath shallow. She hadn't said much since the gunfight, only murmured things in her sleep. Words that didn't belong to the living, names he didn't recognize. As the sun crawled lower, the landscape changed. The desert turning from gold to rust, rust to gray. Bones of old buildings appeared out of the dust, half-buried fences, the frame of a saloon door, the ribs of wagons long forgotten. It was the corpse of Lost Chapel. Calder stopped at the edge of town, or what was left of it. The church was still standing, just barely, its bell tower broken and leaning, the bell itself half sunk into the sand like a gravestone. Smoke still clung to the air here, even after a decade, Ash whined. His ears flattened, tail low. Calder's heart thudded. "I know, boy," he said quietly. "Smells like home." He dismounted, lifting Eleanor gently down. She looked around, eyes glassy, unfocused. But something in her expression shifted as the wind passed through the ruins. A flicker of memory, of recognition. I remember this place, she whispered. Calder nodded. You should. She turned to him slowly, confusion deepening. Why does it feel like it's still burning? Because it is, he thought, but he didn't say it. They walked together through the remains, past blackened timbers, melted glass, the outlines of what had once been streets. Every corner was haunted by echoes, the laughter of a preacher's wife, the creak of the saloon door, the song of a piano that hadn't been touched since the war. Calder's boots crunched over ash. He looked down and realized it wasn't all sand beneath his feet. Some of it was bone. Ash growled low. His nose pointed toward the church. That's when they heard it. A sound soft as prayer, deep as thunder. A man's voice singing, not clearly, not words, just that low hum, old and tired, like someone singing to themselves to keep from going mad. Calder tightened his grip on the rifle. He knew that voice. It had once taught him to shoot. Elias, he said under his breath. The closer they came to the church, the stronger the smell of smoke and metal grew. The door was hanging by one hinge. Inside, the air shimmered with heat that didn't come from any fire Calder could see. And there he was, sitting in the pews like a man waiting for confession. Elias Boone, older, dirtier, face carved by time and pain, but alive. Too alive. He turned slowly and Calder saw it in his eyes. The same cold fire that burned in nightmares. Little brother, Elias said, smiling faintly. Took you long enough. Calder didn't move. You should be dead, Elias chuckled, the sound rough as broken glass. I was. For a while, Eleanor gasped, stepping forward, her voice trembling like a candle flame. Elias, what happened to you? He looked at her then, and something dark flashed across his face. Not anger, not joy, just something hungry. What happened? Elias repeated. You did. The silence that followed felt like a storm holding its breath. Calder took a step closer. You set that fire? Elias's smile widened, bitter and hollow. You really think I'd burn her? Burn the only pure thing this world ever gave us? He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. No, brother. The soldiers lit the match. I just made sure the fire kept her warm after. Calder's voice dropped. You're not making sense. Oh, I'm making perfect sense. Elias stood now, slow, deliberate. You think she died that night? I thought so too. But something out there. He pointed toward the desert, the endless white horizon beyond the window. Didn't want to let go. The ground cracked open, the flames went blue, and when the smoke cleared, she was gone. The kind of gone that doesn't belong to the living anymore. Eleanor trembled. Stop. But Elias didn't. You've seen it, haven't you? Her skin never staying warm, her shadow never lining up with the sun. You brought her back, Boone, but you didn't bring her. Calder's hands shook. His mind clawed for reason, for denial, but every word felt too late. He looked at her, really looked. And he saw it, the faint shimmer around her edges, the dust not touching her dress, the light not sitting right on her skin. Eleanor backed away, tears falling soundlessly. Calder, please. Elias's voice softened, almost kind. She's not your bride, brother. She's what the fire made to remember her. The desert wanted her back, but it couldn't, so it took what was left. Calder raised the rifle. You shut your mouth. Elias didn't flinch. Go on, pull the trigger. See if it kills me this time. The dog barked sharply, once, twice, then growled so deep it shook the floorboards. Eleanor was crying now, shaking her head. He's lying. Please, Calder, don't listen. But the wind outside began to howl again, pushing through the cracks of the church, swirling ash through the air. The smell of burning wood returned, thick and suffocating. The pews began to creak. The bell above groaned like it wanted to fall again. Elias spread his arms wide. You feel it? The land remembers. It always remembers. Calder lowered the rifle an inch, just enough for doubt to slip in. And that was when Eleanor screamed. The air behind her flared red, a shape rising from the shadows, not quite a man, not quite a flame. Its hands were smoke, its eyes black as burnt stone. Ash barked furiously, lunging between Calder and the thing, teeth flashing white against the dark. Elias laughed, voice breaking. She brought it with her, brother. "The desert's dead!" Calder fired, once, twice, 3 times. The bullets passed through the shadow like wind through smoke. It reached for Eleanor, and when it touched her, she screamed again, not in pain, but in memory. The firelight from 10 years ago reflected in her eyes. Then it was gone. Just like that. The church silent again. Eleanor collapsed, breath gone. Ash whimpered, his body shaking. Calder dropped to his knees beside her, whispering her name over and over until it sounded like prayer and curse both. When he looked up, Elias was gone. Only footprints remained, leading into the burning light of the horizon. Calder lifted her once more, his hands blackened with soot that hadn't been there before. He turned to the dog, who looked back with eyes full of fear and devotion. "Come on, boy," Calder said hoarsely. "We finish this before the sun goes down." They rode toward the west, toward the fire that still waited, and the brother who'd already walked through it once. And as they disappeared into the dying light, the wind carried a single whisper across the ashes. Every debt is paid in fire. The desert was burning again, not with fire, but with light. A terrible red holy light that turned the horizon into a wound. Calder Boone rode through it like a man returning to the scene of his own sin. The land around Lost Chapel was dust and ash, but he could still hear the ghosts. Church bells cracked by heat, women screaming, the hiss of flames eating wood and memory, and somewhere in that endless glare, his brother waited. Briscoe trotted ahead, limping now, muzzle gray from the road. The dog had stopped barking hours ago, as if he too understood what waited beyond the ridge. Beside Calder's saddle swung Eleanor's tin cross, the last thing left of her. Or so he'd thought, because last night she'd spoken again. In a dream, maybe, or something worse. He'd heard her voice in the firelight. "The one you buried still breathes." Now he knew who she meant. The man ahead. The man who once shared his blood. The man who'd set the fire that took her. He reached the ridge at sunset. And there, standing among the bones of the chapel, was Ezekiel Boone, or what was left of him. He was thinner now, face hollow as drought, eyes burning with the kind of light you don't get from God. He wore a black duster stiff with soot, and on his belt hung a revolver Calder hadn't seen since the war. Their father's gun, passed down before blood meant nothing. "I heard the desert dragged you back," Ezekiel said. His voice sounded like stone scraping stone. "I came for her," Calder replied. "She's gone," Ezekiel said. "You buried a ghost." Calder's hand rested on his gun, but he didn't draw. "You took her from me once." "I freed her," the brother said, smiling through cracked lips. "You were too blind to see what she'd become. She wasn't meant for you, not after what the war made of you." The words twisted something deep in Calder's gut. "Say her name again," he whispered. Ezekiel laughed. "Eleanor. She belonged to the dust long before you came home. The fire only finished what you started." That was the last thing he said. The guns spoke next. 2 flashes, one red, one white, merging into a storm of echo and dust. Briscoe barked once, sharp and desperate, before the sound swallowed everything. When the smoke cleared, both men were down. Calder on his knees, blood dark across his chest. Ezekiel face first in the ash, eyes open, mouth full of sand. Briscoe limped toward Calder, whining low. The cowboy looked at the sky, now split in half by color. One side burning gold, the other black as judgment. Then he saw her, through the smoke. Through the shimmer of heat, Eleanor, walking toward him, barefoot, white dress untouched by dirt or blood. Her hair floated behind her like a banner made of light. Calder blinked, choking on his own breath. "You're—" She knelt beside him, touching his face. Her hand was cool, too cool. "The desert keeps its promises," she said softly. He wanted to tell her he was sorry, that he'd never stopped riding for her, that every mile since the fire had been a prayer without a God to hear it. But his voice wouldn't come. Briscoe whimpered, collapsing beside him. Eleanor looked down at the dog and smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Good boy," she whispered. "Your watch is over." The horizon flared again, this time with fire, real fire. The chapel ruins ignited, beams of charred wood rising into the air like black wings. Calder felt her fingers slip from his skin. When he tried to hold her hand, there was only smoke. the kind that smells like rain and forgiveness. He fell back, eyes fixed on the burning sky, and for a moment he saw the three of them together again. Her hand in his, Briscoe running beside them through fields that no longer existed. Then the light swallowed everything. By morning there was nothing left of Lost Chapel but silence and a single cross melted into glass. Travelers passing through swore they sometimes saw a rider crossing the flats at sundown, a dog at his heel, and a woman in white walking just behind him. Barefoot in the dust, they said the sky always burned red when they passed. And if you listened close enough, you could still hear the faint toll of a bell, ringing for a wedding that never happened, and a promise the desert refused to forget.